All right, let's take the prayer, please. Master of all worlds, highest power, merciful parent of compassion, in your presence, eternal one,
source of
strength for us, as you have been for our ancestors. Very humbly acknowledge you. What are we? What is our life? You have done such great kindness.
Therefore, we place our wills before you, so that you may forgive and absolve us of all our faults and failings.
That our
Our faults never become barriers between us. And may it be your desire to prepare our hearts with your awe and love for you. You listen to these words of ours. May open our encumbered hearts to the mysteries of your Torah. May this our study be a source of pleasure before your throne of glory. Let's the incense.
Shower down upon
us the light of our soul source.
All the
ways by which we define ourselves. May the sparkles of your holy servants words in the world shine and sparkle. May they merit their ancestors' merit, and the merit of their Torah, their innocence and their holiness stand for us, so as to prevent us from stumbling when we study these words.
Their
merit, may our eyes be illumined by what we study, as in the saying of the sweet singer of Israel. Open my eyes, that I may gaze into wonders of your Torah. May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart be acceptable to you, my rock and my redeemer. For it is the eternal who grants wisdom.
It's from his mouth
that knowledge and understanding issue forth.
Na 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 na. Ah, na na na. Na 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 na. Ah, na na na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na na na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na na na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Ah, na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. We've reached the bottom of 406. And I think the last thing that we looked at was the notion that Na ra'iti gam zakanti velo ra'iti tzadik ne'ezav v'zaro mevakesh lachem. That I've never seen, this is Metatron speaking. I was young, I was old, and Zohar explains that young and old is not just a temporal thing, but it's a state of vitality and a state of depletion. When the union of the Kudsha B'richu and the Shechina is strong, then the youthfulness of God is evident. When the union between Kudsha B'richu and Shechina is weakened or separated, then God's presence withers like an old creature. And then we have the idea that, but never has the righteous one been forsaken. And the question was, well, what do you mean? You just said that sometimes there is a kind of a desiccation, a kind of drying up when things are bad, and when exile follows the sins of the world and everything is broken and depressing. So what do you mean that the tzaddik is not forsaken? Of course the righteous one is forsaken. And the answer that we ended with last time is, well, somebody want to say what the answer is? There's above and below, right? There's forsaken above and forsaken below. Forsaken below is possible, but it's never possible for the tzaddik to be forsaken above, right? So the union between the tzaddik and all of the divine energies and forces, that's always to be established and sustained. The tzaddik is never forsaken in that way. Like, the only question is below, and that's where human beings have impact. That connection is with Shekhinah, is vulnerable and is susceptible to change, susceptible to breaking, if human beings who are the agents of the energies that God seeks to replenish God's self from below, if we withhold those energies, if we withhold the godliness of which we are capable, then there's a shriveling up of the connection between God above and God below here in the world. It's almost a tautology, actually. So it's really aleinu l'shabech. It's up to us to make that linkage happen. During exile, the last lines of that paragraph, the last paragraph, the last full paragraph on 406. During exile, linked above. at other times in both directions, above and below. But an exile only linked above. So, and the exile, of course, is a state of being that is experienced by the Jewish people, but which is reflective of a much broader sense of exile and alienation and separation and failure, right? This is, a universal and a cosmic problem, both. So, but in that case, then at least tzaddik is held onto from above. All right. So now we're on the last line, and we need somebody to step up to be able to. Look at that. Beryl is going to read for us this time.
Look, at least I figured out that I didn't miss a class. It's just that the time before last time that we met, I was still in Florida.
All right, in exile.
In exile? I
Yes,
had it's written. It is written.
No, Florida. Florida is exile. Montclair is promised land.
Okay, it's a red state. I guess you have your point.
I thought it was heaven's waiting room, or
I don't know.
That spot.
I lived in a place that looked like a resort in a state that's a red state and can't function properly. What can I say?
Yeah, exile, like I said. All right.
It is
Bottom of the page. It is written.
written. God placed them in the expanse of heaven. Righteous one. Although it is said in the expanse of heaven, precisely in the expanse of heaven, consummation of the body.
Okay, so the idea is Rakia Hashamayim is the expanse of heaven, and what was placed in that expanse of heaven? The sun and the moon, right, was placed in that expanse of heaven. And now the idea is that heaven is Shamayim, right? And this is Rakia HaShamayim, the expanse of heaven, the firmament of heaven. So Shamayim is also a term that for the Zohar means the upper part of God, the part of God that seeks to unite with the lower part, which is Aretz, earth, right? In the Bereshit, bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, heaven and earth, right? So Shamayim is heaven, and earth is his beloved counterpart, and they are united through the expanse of heaven. And the expanse is, as it says here, righteous one. Tzaddik is to be thought of as the expanse of heaven, the spreading out of heaven. So when we think about the spreading out of heaven, we think about the sky going in all directions, and a kind of a flattening out of the an upper landscape versus a lower landscape. And in that expanse is the sun and the moon, which is also, from the Zohar's perspective, a duo, right? A dyad of sun is male and moon is female, heaven is male, earth is female. So they're really the same idea, but the union of the male and the female in the expanse of heaven is through the righteous one. The righteous one makes that connection. And the expanse is not necessarily this horizontal flattening out. The expanse is the expanse of the generative organ as it reaches out in arousal to meet the partner to be united with. So the expanding is basically the erection.
And that expanse of Shamayim is tzaddik. That's the job of the tzaddik. The job of the tzaddik is for heaven to be able to reach out and expand forward to meet and touch the earth. And that's why it's the consummation of the body. Right? It's the final ending part of the body, which then allows for the sexual consummation by uniting with the earth. Come and see.
Come and see. There are two expanses, beginning and completion, corresponding to one another. Eighth expanse, in which all stars are embedded, small and large, supernal, concealed expanse sustaining all, from which all issues. This is eighth, from below to above, beginning, generating all.
Okay. So if you, so the Zohar says there's going to be a parallelism, right? And there's going to be, depending on how you figure out how to count, if you count to 8, going from up to down, you'll get someplace. If you count from 8, from down to up, you'll get someplace. And you'll see that these two termini of the 8th stage of the counting, each share this quality of being the expanse that sustains all and that gives off, makes it possible for everything else to exist. So if you look at 712, eighth expanse.
Eighth expanse from below to above, bina, eighth, sephra, counting up from Shekhinah. She conceives and births all the lower Sifrot, pictured here as stars.
Right. So that's the idea that all of the stars are embedded in that 8th expanse. And if you count backwards, right, from below, so there are the 7 Sfirot that we are more familiar with, and they go from Shekhinah up through Chesed. And then the next one beyond the 7, the 8th one, is bina. So in general, we know that there's a kind of a setup, a structural expectation. 7 is the magic number. 7 is this sense of totality. The world in its totality is created in 7 days. So 7 is a kind of a culmination. Nevertheless, 8 signifies going beyond that totality to a higher level, or to a level, a realm that transcends or breaks out of the integrity, the cohesion of the 7. So, for instance, when we say the Kaddish, right? We say Yifarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnasei, V'yithadar, V'yitaleh, V'yithalal, Shmei de Kudisha B'richu. That the name of the Kudsha B'richu, the name of the Holy Blessed One, should be praised and elevated and augmented in with 8 terms, because we say La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, because God's name actually is higher and beyond any kind of praises that we can utter. So the 8 is that breaking past the barrier of the supposed wholeness of 7. So now the Zohar plays with that here and says, if you go from Shekhinah, you'll have a totality. The 7 divine energy centers are the kind of all-encompassing life of God that we are privy to. But guess what? That 7 comes from a higher level. from the eighth. The eighth is bina. So bina, also called the upper mother. She is the one who takes all of the energy that is first created through chokhmah, right? Chokhmah unites with bina. Bina takes in all of that energy, gestates it, and then creates 7 beautiful children, all aspects of God. So that's the higher level, literally dispersing and dispensing divinity in its various ways. Okay, so, and she can do that because she's outside of the 7. Right? She's beyond the 7, creating the 7. Okay, generating all. Now, similarly, if we start above and we go from above to below, we'll find another way to go. Similarly, next paragraph.
Similarly, eighth expands from above to below, in which all lights and lamps are embedded, absorbing all, consummation of all. Just as within the eighth expanse that is beginning of all lights are suspended, radiating from there. So this too is eighth expanse. All lights suspended within, absorbed, radiating from there to all worlds. Beginning and completion abide in a single pattern, forming a flowing river whose waters never cease. All so that completion resembles beginning. Therefore, God placed them in the expanse of heaven. Why? To shine upon earth. Although already explained, all shares a single pattern. This is lucidity of the word.
Okay. So if we go backwards from above to below, and we count 8. Now the question is, where do we start from? So here's where the Zohar throws us a little bit of a curveball. We would be prepared to see, as we see in many, many other places, the correspondence that I mentioned before, the upper mother and the lower mother. Right? The upper mother is bina, the lower mother is shechina. Right? So if we count from bina, and then chesed, gevura, tiferet, right? Netzach, hod, yesod, malchut, that's 8. Malchut becomes the 8th, right? But the Zohar doesn't want to do that. The Zohar now kicks the starting point one step higher, right? To chokhmah, because that's really where the dynamic begins. Keter is the beginning of our diagram of Sfirot. Keter is the portal to Ein Sof. That is a place of infinite, undefined being, where we begin to start getting some specificity, even though we really can't even talk about it, so don't mind me, is the next step, chokhmah, when the thought of creation starts taking shape. And then the generation, the making happen of that thought is the union of chokhmah with bina. So everything starts with chokhmah. Chokhmah triggers all of reality. So chokhmah, and then bina, and then you start counting again, right? Chesed, gvura, tiferet, netzach, hod, yesod. So you get to the 8th one, because we've started one up. We end one up. It's not at Shechina, but at Yisod. So what the Zohar has created is a correspondence that's unexpected. We would have expected, like I say, bina paired with Shechina. We have, for instance, this is really rooted in for instance, the four-letter name of God, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. Hey is the doubling letter. Yud is Keter and Chochmah, right? Hey is Bina. Vav is the 6 lower children from Bina, and then the 7th is the next Hey. So that's the Hey and the Hey. So now Zohar says, through using the number 8, but there's a different way of looking at this. And the other way of looking at it is that the correspondence is surprising, because Bina is that mother, and Yesod is the male generative organ. How different can you be? Right? One is, echt female, and one is echt male. Like this is real female over here, Bina, and Yesod is really, really that male member. That's the real signifier of maleness. And yet the Zohar says, if you look at it from this 8 stage rather than from the 7 stage, they're united. They are actually parallel to each other. They correspond to each other because both are the recipients of all the energy that pours into them, which they then release forward. Right. So if you look at the just as within the 8th expanse that is beginning of all, remember in the previous paragraph, there are 2 expanses, beginning and completion. It starts at the top, right? And within that beginning of all lights are suspended, radiating from there, right? Bina has received within herself all of the possibilities of divine unfolding from Chokhmah, and she will then make them be able to go forward. And then Tzaddik, who is the completion expanse, right, is the same thing. All lights suspended within, absorbed, radiating from there to all worlds. What I'm trying to say here is that the Zohar here with the 8, that eighth step, is creating a breaking of the paradigm that we usually work with, and breaks the dichotomy of the male and the female. Because what they're saying in the end is not simply that they complement each other, but they are in a certain sense the same. The female quality of Bina is that she absorbs all of this divine life and then is able to put it out. The male quality of Yesod is that it absorbs all of this divine quality of life and then is able to put it out. So on that level, says the Zohar, they are one and the same. They're the same pattern. They echo each other. I got a note from a former student of mine, responding to a little bit to the Torah Sparks I put out today, and she is very, very shook up and angry and upset and worried about what's going on in our country, and she points out that the danger. She points out to the fact that this is an effort to basically erase the humanity of women. And that effort is one possible wrong turn that comes out of creating the dichotomy of male and female. And believe me, the Zohar is again as male a document as you can possibly imagine. It's totally patriarchally rooted. It's in sometimes misogynist. It's so satisfied with its own male being. And nevertheless, as I've said more than once, the Zohar has enough juice in it. It has enough truth in it that it breaks through its own chains again and again, sometimes gently, sometimes loudly, sometimes self-consciously, sometimes against its own will. But this theosophy that the Zohar is creating here has in it the potential of affecting people to get out of the Zohar's own sense of male entitlement. There's a masculinization of the female, and there is a femininization of the male here, and a claim that they are all one, that it's all, in the end, our job as living beings is to take and to give, to take in and then to process and to give out, to take the light in and then to put it out, to take the life in and then to put it out. The commonality, the common basis for the genders is so basic that it's just so imperative to recognize it and then live it. This is lucidity of the world. This is real clarity. Okay. Let's continue.
What differentiates one from the other? One sustains and nourishes the higher world, including itself, along with all those supernal aspects, while the other sustains and nourishes the lower world, along with all those lower aspects.
Okay, so one is higher, one is lower. One is beginning, one is completion. Right? Bina sustains the upper world, and Yesod, Tzaddik, right, is down below, dispensing sustenance to the lower world. But now the Zohar complicates things a little bit more.
I'm reading.
Now you might ask,
Who is the higher world? After all, that eighth expanse, supernal, concealed, is the higher world, and so it is named. For there are two worlds, as has been explained.
okay, so there's a question, we'll come back to that. Let's see what the answer is. Next page.
Well, it is the higher world, and all those issuing from it are named after it, while all those issuing from the lower world are named after it. All this and that, all one, blessed be He forever and ever.
Right. So there's the Zohar back to male emphasis again. So the Zohar is asking, what exactly, how does bina function? Because there's a special quality that's mentioned for bina which is not mentioned besides the higher and the lower. What differentiates one from the other? One sustains and nourishes the higher world. So that if we just left it at that, So that would be bina sustains the higher world, and tzaddik, yesod, sustains the lower world. But there's this extra phrase, including itself. Including itself. So that means that bina also self-sustains. Bina is sustaining herself as well as all of the stars or all of the divine energies that issue out of bina. So then when we get to tzaddik, to yesod, we don't have that phrase. We say, while the other sustains and nourishes the lower world. Right? It doesn't say along with itself. So bina has a quality that's different from yesod, from tzaddik. Bina has a kind of a self-referential energy that yesod does not have. Yesod's function is to collect the divine energy and then inject it into Shekhinah so that it can then revive God's yearning desire, but also so that then Shekhinah can dispense it into the lower world. So Yesod is a collecting a terminus, but not for itself. Right? The whole point of Yesod is to pay it forward. But with Bina, Bina is going to pay it forward, but Bina also has her own self that she nourishes, because Bina is always, never stopping in union with Chokhmah. And she is both interacting and reinforcing that basic fundamental grounding of union and love, and then also distributing it and putting it out there and aggrandizing it in its various extra forms. Yesod has a much less complicated role. Yesod is a channel. Yesod is the place where everything comes together so that it can then be moved forward. But it doesn't have the same sense of union. It's not a partner. It's an extension of the partner. It's an expanse of heaven, right? It serves heaven, but it isn't heaven. Bina is an equal partner with Chokhmah in and of herself. Right? So there's a distinction to be made. And again, in that respect, if we want to go back to male and female, that female quality of Bina is, an additional special quality that Tzaddik doesn't have. Note from Larry. This is another example of ending a whole elaborate discussion by saying all this and that are one. Absolutely, right? For sure. No matter how elaborate, no matter how complicated, no matter how many pieces are part of the statement, in the end, that's the punchline, right? That we should understand that this kind of complex picture is really just a union. If you think about a painting that can have zillions of different kinds of colors and brushstrokes and shapes and so on, but if it's a great painting, it will all be unified. It will all be one thing, where every little piece is contributing to the union. So the same thing over here, but with these nuances, or with these differentiations, which make us appreciate that the oneness is a living oneness. It's not a flat, one-dimensional oneness. Yeah. All right. Any other comments before we go further? Okay. So Now 408.
Actually, can I just ask a general question on this? It does seem like the Zohar in general does make all these masculine, feminine distinctions, but they are combined then in each person, like each person has attributes of both. So it's really not limiting the way someone, it's not expecting every female to be a representation of bina and only bina. Or like, am I right in that? It is saying that these are mixed up, both in above and below and in each human being then.
Yeah, I would say that that's correct. However, I would say that it's very hard for people to hold that correct view for any length of time and to actually live it. The history of the Zohar is that it sustained in a substantial way a patriarchal society that was totally androcentric and that totally, subordinated women in their roles in society, in Jewish living, in Jewish identity, per se. They were second class and secondary, Jews as opposed to the real Jews. And of course, they inherited that from traditional rabbinic Judaism per se. So the Zohar succeeded in functioning very well in a society whose perspective was not as open as that.
But that was a choice of that society. Like we're reading it today and we can make a completely different choice.
We can work at holding on to that perception and that apprehension, that we can apprehend that concept and try to keep holding it. But as I say, we've had it before and we'll have it again. The Zohar will then speak in other ways that will not reaffirm that kind of idea. They'll be because they're still operating in the real world. They're still operating for the real world. For the Zohar is a male-dominated world, and this is not being written to be read by women. So again, the men are maybe super extra sensitized by reading the Zohar, but there's nothing in the Zohar that says, okay, let's open up the doors of the Beit Midrash. Let's get going here. Let's get the extra divine energies flowing.
Well, I feel that's a very common problem in ancient scripture, not only ours. I mean, it's a problem in Hinduism right? Too, for example, or medieval. Yes. I mean, Hinduism is great with goddesses and goddess power and female power, and yet it was also very patriarchal, right. Where women are still struggling. So, right. I mean, I feel like, I don't mean to discount that, but I feel like it's not relevant to me when regarding like, what can I learn from this scripture? Because I do feel like we can make a different choice right. now than would have been possible in the medieval era.
If anything, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to enhance how special it is for us to be able to look at this differently, right? And that's part of what I see my job as, is to like scratch the surface away a little bit, to be able to look at that with a little bit of a different kind of perspective. Not everybody would teach that text the way I just taught it. So, yeah.
Well, Yasher Kolak then.
Well, that's what we try. We try. Okay. Good. Come and see. One more second. I just want to say also, the we is hopefully everybody on this screen that's in front of me. But don't take it for granted that the we is like so out there. Again, back to the politics. There's the we is a we are we're in the middle of a big fight about who the we is. Okay.
Come and see. The trees of Yud-Hey Vav-Hey are sated. The cedars of Lebanon that he planted. Who is Lebanon? This has already been established. This verse explained.
Okay. So now we turn to Psalm 104. We recited this a couple of days ago for Rosh Chodesh, right? So the verse, and it's I said it before, I'll say it again. It's a great psalm. It's a knockout of a psalm. It's such a wonderful, total work of art, in the sense that it's visual and it's musical, and it's just this orchestrated sense of what a beautiful world might be, without with acknowledging a lot of the sharpness of it. This is a psalm that celebrates wild animals tearing their prey apart, and saying that's the way it should be. And and human beings should go out to work and come back home at night and be safe and sound. But meanwhile, the animals should do what comes naturally to them too. Everybody should be part of this gigantic jigsaw puzzle, and it should all be amazing and be wonderful. And it starts with a beautiful picture of creation, which we recall traditionally in the morning when we put on our talit. God wraps God's self in a garment of light. So this verse that we're citing now goes Yispe'u Atzei Hashem, right? The trees of the Eternal One are sated, right? So these are all the trees in the world are Atzei Hashem. All the trees in the world. It's not like this, like just the Garden of Eden trees belong to God, and the rest of the trees are belong to us. No, all of the world is God's world. So, but here it's using this possessive, that God's trees are so happy and satiated. Arzei Levanon asher nata, the cedars of Lebanon that God planted. So, if we have this parallelism, right? This is a psalm with a phrase A and a phrase B. Phrase A talks about the trees and calls them God's trees. The phrase B, the second part of the verse, also describes the trees. What's the description of the trees? What's the adjective, so to speak, of the trees there? Trees of Lebanon. So you have a little bit of a difference. Trees of God versus trees of Lebanon. But the Zohar will never let that difference stand. If the first part says trees of God, then trees of Lebanon has to be a variation on trees of God. It's got to be a similar phrase. It's got to be referring to a congruent issue. So how does that work? Who is Lebanon? Right? This trees of Lebanon. What does Lebanon signify? Well, we all know that, says the Zohar. We've talked about this before, right? So look at 721. The note.
Lebanon. This has already been established. Lebanon symbolizes Okma,
We all knew that.
while its cedars are the 6 Sifrot from Hesed to Yesod, which began as saplings in the higher Sephardic realm and were later transplanted into Shekhinah.
Okay, take a look now. If you skip the first few lines of that next paragraph, Rabbi Hanina said.
Oh, where are we? Because I'm at Yud Hey Vav Hey, Elohim planted a garden in Eden.
Right. Keep going.
As is written, the trees of Yud Hey Vav Hey are sated, the cedars of Lebanon that he planted, Rabbi Hanina said. They resembled antennae of grasshoppers, and the Blessed Holy One uprooted them, transplanting them in the Garden of Eden.
Right. And then they become real cedars of Lebanon. Then they became starker. So that's the Midrash, and the Zohar follows up on this. But Lebanon, is understood to be a high reference to God, It's a name of God as well. The trees of Yud-Heh Vav-Heh are satiated, right? And the cedars of Lebanon that are the cedars that Lebanon has planted, right? That God, Lebanon, has planted. So Lebanon comes from the word Lavan, right? The white one, right? Which signifies the white, ancient one, who is seen as like the white bearded, timeless, beginning mythological figure of God. So these are the other sfirot, the other divine aspects. They're called trees. And now, what happens in their trees? Next paragraph.
These birds build their nests. The stork has her home in the junipers. These birds build their nests. Where? In Lebanon. These are two birds we have discussed in numerous places, from whom numerous other birds disperse. However, these are supernal, issuing from Lebanon concealed, mystery of the world. Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the elder was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel.
Okay, so this is now seen as a picture of the divine unfolding, right? God's growing. God's kind of like organic opening up, as just the way trees and nature itself unfolded in creation. So God is also this unfolding divine organism with differentiations. So who are the two birds? Well, we have a verse, not Lebanon, but Lavan, right? The white one had two daughters, Leah and Rachel. Who are Leah and Rachel? We had all the way back. We have to remember a little bit in our Jacob saga that we're still in the middle of, actually. Rachel is Shechina. Leah is bina, right? Leah is the concealed one. Rachel is the one who goes out, into the, with the other shepherds and goes and waters her flocks. Leah is the one who hides and is concealed from Jacob, and he's surprised to find out that he has married her. Remember all of that stuff? So Leah is the concealed one, who is the higher realm of bina. Rachel is the lower realm, but still all of these are realms within the divine organism. And they all ramify, they all unfold out of Lebanon, out of the ancient one, who is making more and more variety within godliness, so that there can be variety in earthliness. Right? In order for this world to have the possibility of diversity, multiplicity, richness, and everything that it has, in order for this created world to have all of that stuff, first God had to cook up a rich, diverse, complicated God source for the world that we have. And that's where all the trees and the birds are simply various aspects of God's own united, singular multiplicity. Okay. The stork.
The stork.
Yeah, so that's the next word. That's the next verse, right? So it says, let me just find it for a second. Right. Asher sham tziparim yekanenu. There, in those trees, the birds find their nests, make their nests. Chasida roshim beita. right? And the Hasidah, the stork, she has her home, Beita, in these other trees, the junipers. Okay, so let's see what that is.
In those, the stork has her home in the junipers, as is written. The name of the elder was Leah.
The verse we just quoted at the end of the previous paragraph.
Has her home in the junipers. In those 6 supernal suns, 6 directions of the world, as has been said.
Okay. So she finds her home, her house, in her children, and she had 6 children, right? So that's her nest. That's her dwelling place. That's the stork's home. And we had already the 6, which then multiplies into 12, of course, the 6 directions of the world. She creates the possibility for Israel to take their own home, to make their own home in the world. So that's where she lives. She lives through her sons. Now, her name is Hasidah. The stork is called Hasidah. Why?
Why is she called Hasidah, stork? Because this is the higher world, though called female. For when it expands, all goodness and radiance issue.
Keep going.
I'm trying to find it. Since she is Hasidah, Hesed issues from her. Primordial light, as is written, Elohim said, let there be light.
Okay. So Hasidah is feminine of Hasid, right? Hasid, the one who is characterized by Chesed. She, though, is feminine. She's the female. So we talked already just a few minutes ago about the fact that bina has such a significant role in engendering the 6 sons and engendering the possibility of a God who is active in the world. And don't be surprised, says the Zohar, that she is feminine. Right? We would think, after all, and that's what we do. Once we step down out of bina, we then gender the rest, the overwhelming rest of God's being as male, right? And that male lover seeks union with Shekhinah, right? His feminine counterpart. But now all of a sudden we see that it's all made possible through the loving generosity of bina. So what is her first offspring? Chesed itself, right? Generous love is her first offspring, right? That's the first thing that comes out of bina, right? So she is Hasidah. She is the hay of Chesed. Okay, and then we have the identity also made with the primordial light. When God said, "Let there be light," that light is that first expansive givingness, right? And that's Chesed, right? The idea of creating by giving, right? It's pretty. I mean, it is a beautiful image because there could have been so many other things that we could have started with the story with. You know, God could have said, let there be goodness. Let there be reality. You know, let there be a human being. Let there be who knows what. But that's the beginning of all being, is the infinitely spreading forth of light, right? A completely generous and unstoppable entity, right? Okay, so she has her home in the junipers.
I'll read, but I have a question.
Sure.
This stork is very confusing. Is a stork kosher?
I think it is. I'm not sure. I have to look.
Oh, because I thought
Maybe
it was.
not. I don't know.
I thought it wasn't. And I guess that
Could be not. Could be not. You could be
this
right.
stork is very important.
The stork is very important, but she's concealed. She's not available. If she is actually not kosher, then I would be explaining it that way, right? That she is, out of bounds. But that requires a little bit of looking. So I will have to look at it. I may not be able to find it tonight.
That's okay.
But it requires sarich iyun. We need to look it up. Okay, I'm going to look it up later. Okay.
So she has her home in the junipers.
Right. And the word junipers is broshim.
2 syllables. Broshim.
Broshim.
To 3 syllables. Okay. Broshim, junipers. Do not read beroshim in the junipers, but rather barashim.
Berashim.
Berashim in the heads. For the other world has her home in lower realms and is court of justice of the world. Sometimes she is called as above by all those names. Of this site is written, Yud-He Vav-He was sorry and his heart was saddened. And the burning anger of Yud-He Vav-He, which depend on this site. For everything above is entirely radiant, vitality in all directions. So we have learned there is no sadness before the omnipresent, before precisely. Therefore it is written, serve Yud-He Vav-He with joy. Come before him with singing. Serve Yud-He Vav-He with joy, corresponding to the higher world. Come before him with singing, corresponding to the lower world.
Okay, so here we have a similar theme to the one that we had when we asked about the righteous one being forsaken. And we made a distinction between the upper world and the lower world. The righteous one is never forsaken in the upper world. It's whether or not the righteous one will be connected to the lower world, that depends on all kinds of factors. And in a time of exile, when the factors of goodness are not put into play, then the righteous one will be forsaken. But in the upper world, never. So now we have again the distinction between the upper mother and the lower mother. The upper mother is the Hasidah, and the way the Zohar reads it now is that her home is Berashim, in the highest places, in the heads, right? In the topmost places. And therefore, for the Zohar, she is not susceptible to disappointment, to sadness, to alienation, to exile, to fury and anger because of those kinds of negative energies. She's up there in the clouds. I said before that bina is always constantly united with chesed, with chokhmah, right? With chokhmah, her partner. She doesn't know separation. She has no concept of what it means to fail in finding union. So she is up in the roshim, in the highest places, and she only knows joy. She only knows fulfillment. But the other world has her home in lower realms and is the court of justice of the world. That's Shekhinah. Shekhinah has a much more complicated, well, not complicated, I don't know, I wouldn't say complicated, but a much more dark side to what she has to do. She has to give forth life, but she has to give forth life in a context where the life can be messed up, where the people who are given life will be disappointing, will act wrongly, will cut the flow of love and life, and she then will have to try to manage that. So bina is not a manager. Bina is this contented, beloved mother who gives forward beautiful children. Not exactly the earthly Leah, right? But this is the image that the Zohar posits for the heavenly Leah, maybe a kind of a redemptive image, a compensatory image, compensation for all the tsaras that Leah had below. But that's the point, says the Zohar. There are tsaras below, there are no such thing as tsaras above. But there's that distinction between the higher and the lower mother. So she is the court of justice. She has to look and see whether things are right or wrong. And she has to make judgment calls. That's the left side that now flows into Shekhinah. Bina, if you look at the diagram, Bina is on the left. But the nature of the left has not turned into restraint and judgment and execution and all of that stuff. It doesn't happen until after we get through chesed, right? When we get into gvura. So sometimes she is called as above by all those names, right? That she is the repository and the recipient of everything that comes from above her. But nevertheless, she then, when she gives it forward, she will then know sorrow and disappointment, all of the verses that we have from the flood story, right? And then the burning rage of God, where Moses talks about God's disappointment and anger with the children of Israel themselves, right? They all depend on this side. This is all part of what Shekhinah has to carry. For everything above is entirely radiant, right? Bina is above the clouds, right? If you think about it, even just in terms of the atmosphere, you can have a cloudy day, you can have shadows and so on, but if you fly above the clouds, then there's no element that takes away any of the light. There is no light and shade, there's just light. That's bina, right? And that's why we have a saying in rabbinic literature that there is no sadness before the omnipresent one. So the Zohar says before the omnipresent one. In the earliest stages of the unfolding of God, before we get to the dichotomy of good and evil, of giving and restraining, before that, there's no sadness. There's no such thing as a negative, where never was heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. So that's Bina's home. Okay, so then we have the Mizmor LeTodah. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, bo'u lefanav birnana. Serve God the Eternal with joy. That's the higher world. And then come before God with singing comes to the lower world. What's the idea of singing in the lower world? So there's a long note here, and no, that's the previous note. There's a short note here, but it's a subtle point that we don't have that much time to unpack. We'll talk about it. I hope next time you'll have to remind me if I forget. But that is singing. Who sings? Who are the singers in Judaism?
Levites.
The Levites. The Levites are on the left. The priests are on the right. The priests are chesed. So the Levites are on the left, and they are the singers. So on the one hand, singing, we think about singing as a beautiful expression, but singing has, for the Zohar, certain left-handed qualities. Number one, you can't just sing any way you want. You know, if you sing off key or off tune or in an ugly way, that's not good singing. So singing requires discipline. Singing and music are calculated. You know, there's a close connection between mathematics and music. So singing is a human expression of judgment, calculation. When do I go fast? When do I go slow? When do I go loud? When do I go soft? And all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of thought and restraint that has to go into singing. Singing can be very sad. Singing is not only joy. Singing encompasses both joyous singing and also lamentation. So singing is an expressive human activity that has within it a more complicated nature than simply joy. So undifferentiated joy above. When we get down to us, then we have the human need and the human capacity to express multiple emotions, joy and sadness, or coping with sadness, trying to hold on to the sadness in a way that doesn't destroy us. There's a joy in being able to communicate that sadness to somebody else through a song. So that's the differentiation that we have here in the Zohar. We're going to stop here, and God willing, we'll continue next time. Zaygas into everybody.
Yash Koach.